Hey guys, it's Izzy here, and today we are going to be looking at my 5-star predictions from 2022 and seeing if they lived up to my expectations. So this is a second video in a duology, so if you would want to know the descriptions of these books, what they're about, check out that video. I will have it linked in the description box of this video and in the pinned comment of this video, but this video is just going to be my thoughts on these books. Let's get into it. The first book I'm going to be talking about is Anxious People by Fredrik Backman. There's one thing that Backman knows how to do, it's how to write characters. We have a large cast here, but they're all properly developed and all each like their own individual. You never get the set of characters confused because they're all so different and diverse. They all have their own story and insecurities. They might not be likable characters, but they are real characters. They all have their flaws and imperfections. The characters are locked in an apartment or in a police station for the story, but you never feel like you're in a stagnant situation like the characters are. Because sometimes when it's just like one or two settings throughout the whole story, you can kind of start to feel claustrophobic and like it's never going to end and that it gets boring, but that is not an issue with Anxious People by Fredrik Backman. The writing was a bit confusing at times, just with the different timelines, like of characters having flashbacks and whatnot. Also, you had to make sure that you had the connections right. So I was taking notes while reading this, and that's something that I highly suggest. I didn't annotate the book, but I did have my little notebook next to me being like, okay, this is how these people are connected. This is what this person does for a living. This is how old this person is. Like, you really do need to make a chart when you're reading Anxious People. There are so many themes in this book to uncover. We're all trying to do our best and do good for the world, even if it doesn't always turn out as planned. Another theme could be second chances and if you should take them or not when they are presented in life. And then lastly is just the different stages in life and how we all do age, and how age is a beautiful thing and it's not something that we should be ashamed of, because it's really beautiful to grow old. I'm gonna get emotional thinking about it, but it just means that you have lived a life, and a life is a beautiful thing. A life is a story all in itself, and I think that's presented well by Fredrik Backman. This did get a 4.5 out of 5 stars for me. I do think it would be better on reread, as I wouldn't have a lot of the confusion that I had the first time going in. So technically in Goodreads this was a 5 out of 5, but in my head it's a 4.5 out of 5. Next we have the Overstory by Richard Powers. I did annotate this one, and since it was over 500 pages, I did follow along with the audiobook. The characters were all very new, unique and interesting. I almost said new, but I guess you can say they're new. They're not like characters that I've read before. There's a lot of representation in this book, such as disability representation and race. We have characters from all different backgrounds. I think that's so important to see diverse cast of characters in such popular books as the Overstory. As you can see, this was winner of the Pulitzer Prize. At the beginning, I was really scared that none of these stories would connect, but they do. All the branches come together beautifully. My favorite characters were Nick and Olivia. You are one with nature when reading the Overstory by Richard Powers. Obviously, when you have a book about nature, the writing is going to be descriptive, and that's what you get here. And therefore, hopefully you have a great atmosphere, and don't worry, you do in the Overstory. As stated before, the writing was very descriptive and impactful, just wowing you. So many quotes left me pondering, and I'm still thinking about them to this day. The thing that was off with this story though was the pacing. So the first section felt like a short story collection, when the rest felt like an actual novel, that this was all one thing rather than just a lot of separate stories taking place. I would have given this book a 4.5 on Goodreads. They're 4 or 5 stars if it didn't have that pacing issue, but I ended up having to give it a 4-star. And really, it just went on for far too long. I think this could have been 200 pages shorter, because as we got to the end of the book, you can see less tabs were happening. I wasn't really caring about the characters or the plot anymore at this point. I was just wanting the book to end. The plot brings up a lot of important topics that most people probably don't think about that often. My takeaway was that we should appreciate the smallest things, even if they are large in a physical sense. So many of us take for granted the beauty of the nature around us, and it's quite sad if I'm being honest. This book gave me a new appreciation for trees and other plant life, and I'm just finding myself looking at them more and just appreciating the beauty of little things like little shards of grass. Like, it really just made me look at nature more, and I'm so happy about that. And I think that's such an important thing that we as people need to feel. We need to feel how important nature is and how nature made us in a way. I mean, in the creation story, we were all living amongst nature, Adam and Eve. And so I think nature is something that is very important to being human. And so I think this is a great book to read to see those themes. And this was a 4 out of 5. Now we have The Immortalists by Chloe Benjamin. I connected with the female characters ever so slightly, but there wasn't a tremendous love for them. And then the male characters felt rather one-dimensional to me. Maybe if we got more time with each character, I would have connected better with them, but from what we have here, I didn't really connect with them. This setting is really cool because with each character, each sibling, we have a different location and a different time period, or maybe we have the same location and it's just like 20 years apart or something. I just found that really cool because we see how the world is changing at the same time as the characters' lives are changing. The writing was only slightly above average here. The themes are the important part in this book, and those themes are life and death, something as a human that you can't avoid. Is there free will, or do we all have a set destiny, or is it a mix of both? Who knows? Let me know what you guys think. This book left me thinking a lot, but it was a little too open-ended for my taste. Therefore, I gave The Immortalists, what did I give it? 3 out of 5 stars. Now we have the first 5-star of the project, like the first official 5-star, not a 4.5. This is a full 5 out of 5, and that is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood by Quentin Tarantino. And I did read the hardback edition because the hardback and paperback are slightly different. I haven't read the paperback yet. I think it's actually somewhere back there maybe, but no, it's actually on that shelf over there. So I did read the hardback one if you guys are curious. This is a character-driven novel at its finest. Cliff is still the coolest when Rick still has the most boring point of views. If I could be dropped into one story, this would be it. I think this is a lot for the setting and atmosphere. The writing was where we have a bit of a downfall for me. At the start, we had a bit of head jumping between the characters, but it did get better as the novel went on. Like literally after the first chapter, I didn't really have any other issue with it. If you're thinking you don't need to read this because you've seen the movie, you are wrong. This adds so much more. There's so many like different scenes that we don't see in the movie, and just adds so much more to an already very character-driven 3-hour-long movie. I still recommend picking this up, and if you haven't seen the movie, you would still gain a lot from reading this book. So if you're not a movie person and a book person, maybe pick up the book. Now we have my favorite book of 2022, which was a 5-star prediction for me, and that is Cloud Cuckoo Land by Anthony Dower, which was a 5 out of 5 stars for me. Great character work here. I want to say Zeno is the character that we really had the greatest arc, but we spend more time with him from the time he is a child to the time he is an old man. But it's so hard to choose because all these character arcs are fantastic. You get so hooked on a section that you don't want it to end, but then you just end up being enthralled with the next one. So this book is it's a page turner. You're always wanting to know what's going to happen next. All these stories are connected. I was scared that they wouldn't be, but Anthony Dower definitely knew what he was doing here. I wasn't certain how this would go atmosphere-wise. We were given a lot, and it might be overwhelming to some audiences. To start, I'll go in chronological order. We have the first setting is in Bulgaria and Greece in the 1400s, and then we have Idaho from roughly the 1930s to the 2070s, and then we have a character in the near future, a few generations away on a spaceship. This is a lot to take in, and I didn't know how it would all come together, but it did. Each setting was like something I had never read before, and it just gave me so much knowledge on the world and human experiences throughout the world and throughout time, and how even if time passes, millennia pass, we are still we're human at our core, and being human, you have those sets of emotions that are always there, and yeah, you can find somebody you can relate to in any century. The writing was that of a Greek epic. It read like a classic fairy tale-like in a way. This felt like a story as old as time, which is poetic in a way, as the two main themes here are stories and time. The chapters were short, so I never felt bogged down and like I had to stay in one place forever. It was a quick read for an almost 600-page book. I did do the audiobook for this one as well, but I followed along as I read. So again, 5 out of 5. favorite book of the year. Let's go to another 5 out of 5, and that is Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. If there's one thing that Taylor Jenkins Reid knows how to do, it's write compelling characters. In her previous books, I loved reading from the characters, but the characters were unlikable people. I didn't like them as people. But in here, the Riva siblings, they're characters that I can root for and love. The side characters are developed enough that the reader even knows each one by name, even if they got so little page time. I think they could each get a book of their own like Carrie Soto did. Malibu became a character in itself, especially in the early pages of the novel. I had such vivid images in my head of what Malibu must have been like in the past, as I've only visited in the 2010s. This is the best writing I've seen from Taylor Jenkins Reid. It's just different than her other works. The themes of nepotism were presented here, and if a person is really famous because of their family and how they were raised, or if they actually are talented. Another theme presented here was generational trauma and how someone is raised, how that impacts their mentality as a person. This book might take place in one day, but you really see the characters develop and become who they are as a person. I love everything about how Taylor Jenkins Reid writes her books. And again, this was a 5 out of 5 star. We are in our nonfiction section now, starting with The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Sloot. This is a nonfiction, and for my nonfiction, I do listen along with the audiobook, as it's usually the author narrating, and that was the case here. Or I'm pretty sure it was. I don't want to say it was because I'm not 100%. I did annotate this one, and this was a 5 out of 5 star for me. Best nonfiction of the year. I felt for these people. You could really see them as humans rather than just names on a page, and you could really feel their emotions as people. We see the sides of good and evil that humanity has. It gives you hope in the world, and in some times you just get pure rage at how somebody could treat another human being. Rebecca Sloot did a great job at bringing these people to life and humanizing Henrietta Lacks, that her and her family are more than just cells under a microscope in a science lab. When I first opened this book, the writing blew me away. It felt like I was reading an actual novel than a piece of nonfiction. The storytelling was just amazing. It hooks the reader. I highly recommend the audiobook, as it feels like you're actually listening to a story and not having facts thrown into your face. Nonfiction is always a hit or miss with the writing. It can be very boring and dry, or it can be a whole worthwhile experience. This is accessible and easy to read. It is so worth it to learn about this woman and her contribution to the world. This plot is so important, and I don't know why it's not taught in schools. There is actually a young adult version of this book, and I think that should be read and taught in schools to children. Believe it or not, Henrietta Lacks has impacted all of our lives. The story shows the morals or lack of morals that are in science. It brings up so many things that seem to be hidden away in American history. Many of us just assume it was the Nazis doing experiments on people, when it was happening here in the United States in the last century. It is disgusting and needs to be brought to light. I'm glad that the Lacks family finally found someone like Rebecca Sloot to respect them and bring their mother's story to light. Again, this was a 5 out of 5 star for me. Our next nonfiction pick was a 4 out of 5, and that is She Has Her Mother's Laugh, The Powers, Perversions, and Potential of Heredity, and this is by Carl Zimmer. And I did the audiobook for this one as well, as it is quite a beast and nonfiction. She Has Her Mother's Laugh starts with the word heredity and where it comes from and where it gets its meaning. After the etymology, we talk about how this word heredity was first used. Oftentimes it was used to describe the heir to the throne and the descendants of a king. It went from Roman times to the eyes of the future of what could happen to genes, how they can be engineered, and if it's ethically okay to do so. I think it's best if the reader goes in with some prior knowledge on this subject. It got dense at times and was just too much information to take in. I did learn a lot, and I do still recommend it, but a lot of this went right over my head. A romance pick, and that is Heard It in a Love Song by Tracy Garvish Graves. And somebody who was a 5-star author in this video, Taylor Jenkins Reid, enjoyed this book, but I ended up giving this romance a 2 out of 5 stars. Could this be the biggest flop of the 5-star prediction project? So far, yes. At the start, I could definitely tell that Josh was going to be the more developed of the two characters. We got more time with him as a character, and we really saw his story from when he was a teenager to the current day. When with Layla, we just saw her in her adult life, her marriage, and then what happened after her marriage. And it's kind of funny that Josh is the more developed character because it's Layla's picture that is on the cover of the book. But still, the characters were Gary and Mary Sue's. They were very one-dimensional. This just shows in romance, characters are so important. The writing is what got me through this. It was very fast-paced and easy to read. The formatting of the flashback scenes was just kind of awkward, as the character would just kind of zone out and then it'd be like, Earth to Josh, like, it was just kind of random and weird. The plot sounded like something interesting and would have interesting dynamics, as it was two characters who were getting out of long-term relationships and coming into the world of internet dating, which wasn't around 20 years ago when they were first getting married. However, this is the most boring romance book that I've ever read. We are on our last book now, and that is After the Flood by Cassandra Montag. This was a 3 out of 5, and this is a science fiction. Surprisingly, the characters ruined this whole book for me. Myra was a holier than thou kind of person, like she was the last good person left in the world. Her daughter Pearl was kind of annoying, but I'll give her that. She's a kid. Kids can be annoying, so I'm not going to judge a kid too harshly as I'm going to judge a grown woman. The world building is where the author had success with this novel. I always find world building in science fiction and fantasy so important because these are worlds that us on Earth we don't really know much about, so the author really has to do a lot to make sure we understand the world that we are in. The writing was average. Okay, so my camera died, so I am having to switch to the iPhone footage, so I'm sorry if it's not as good, but the plot sounds intriguing, as this is a mother on a quest to find her daughter missing in the flood, like the world has been flooded, the Great Flood, and she has to go on this trek to find her missing daughter, and you just feel like that would be such an awesome story. But the characters were just, they ruined it for me. I would recommend this book if maybe you are into dystopian books, but if you don't really know a lot about the genre, I wouldn't recommend this being your starting place. So After the Flood got a 3 out of 5 stars for me. So I think I did pretty decent in the 5-star prediction project. 3 of the books were full 5 out of 5 stars. We had some 4.5s. Like all these books, except probably the last 2, I would consider good books. The only one I really wouldn't recommend is Heard It in a Love Song. So I do think I know my reading taste quite well. If you look over here, you can kind of see a sneak peek of next week's video and my 5-star predictions for 2023, so stay tuned for that. I will be doing a blog post on both of these things, on my 5-star prediction results of 2022 and then what my 5-star predictions for 2023 are. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and as always, comment, rate, and subscribe, and don't forget to ring that notification bell to be notified when all my videos go live. If you made it through the whole video, leave any kind of water emoji in the comments below. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.